ceasefire, November 4th, 2008, which just coincidentally happened to be the day of the historic election of Barack Obama. It virtually guaranteed that no one in America would notice. And that's exactly how it played out. When Hamas resumed rocket attacks after Israel broke the ceasefire, Israeli officials went on American television and got away with blaming Hamas for breaking the ceasefire.
You know, it was Hamas that unilaterally tore up the ceasefire understandings. It was Hamas that escalated the violence that reached a crescendo on Christmas Day, when we had in one 24-hour period some 80 rockets, mortar shells, and missiles coming into Israel, attacking our civilians. Now, we want to work with the Palestinian government.
And the lie was then repeated uncritically by US news media.
James, there's no question here, is there, that Hamas started this?
Well, look, I don't think Israel had any choice. It was a ceasefire that was broken by Hamas. They fired something like 300 rockets into Israel. I mean, this is an act of war. What are they supposed to do?
Just compare this to how media outside the US dealt with this.
Isn't it the fact that during the ceasefire, not a single Israeli was killed? And the reason for that was because Hamas fired not a single rocket.
No, I think you're wrong, unfortunately, because during that ceasefire of 6 months, they were firing rockets on a daily basis.
On Channel 4 in Britain, you saw an anchor presenting evidence that the Israeli government itself acknowledged that Hamas observed the ceasefire.
This is actually a document that's given to journalists by the Israeli government. And in this document it says, and I'm quoting, Hamas was careful to maintain the ceasefire.
The Israeli official, clearly caught in a lie, attempts to change the subject to how evil Hamas is. But the interviewer doesn't let him get away with it.
They were firing rockets, and they're always trying to target civilians. Their main goal is to try to kill children and women. And not
Mr. Shalom, I'm going to have to stop you, because this document is published by the Intelligence and Terrorism Information Center at the Israel Intelligence Heritage and Commemoration Center, and they say that Hamas maintained the ceasefire.
It's not a government, it's a private institution.
It's given to foreign journalists by the government as a statement of fact.
Listen,
now the facts
you would like to hear the facts, or you would like to invent some facts?
I would like you to tell me the facts.
So the facts are...
Exchanges like these are unthinkable in the US, even though Israel itself, behind the scenes, acknowledged Hamas had observed the ceasefire, something another British reporter forced Israeli spokesperson Mark Regev to admit on camera.
There were no Hamas rockets during the ceasefire. Before November the 4th, there were no Hamas rockets for 4 months.
And that's correct.
Israel officially recognizes that until it broke the ceasefire, Hamas didn't fire a single rocket. I mean, the propaganda is so powerful that these truisms, literally truisms, are almost inexpressible.
Look at how American media covered Israel's 2014 attack on Gaza. A keyword search of all the major networks showed that over the course of the 51-day assault, Israel's ongoing military siege and blockade of Gaza were barely mentioned compared to the thousands of times Hamas rocket attacks on Israel were mentioned.
Why is Hamas launching missiles into population centers of Israel?
The basic propaganda frame is built into the very assumptions journalists bring to the table.
Since Israel pulled out of Gaza in 2005, 8,000 rockets have been fired from Gaza into Israel.
This is how propaganda works. It works by getting your words in the mouths of other people, especially the mouths of supposedly objective media commentators.
I'm wondering, though, whether you're outraged by the conduct of Hamas, starting the conflict by firing rockets, building tunnels to kill and kidnap Israelis, being more than willing to sacrifice Palestinian lives by embedding them into their own kind of arsenal and using them, as Israel contends, as human shields. Do you have a level of outrage at Hamas itself?
Our media operations, national media, is a scandal when it comes to Israel. I look at the UK with all its deficit, and there's a real debate. For example, there's this anchor called Jon Snow, Channel 4 in the UK, and he interviewed Mark Regev, and he grilled him with questions, grilled him.
Mark Regev, how does killing children on a beach contribute to that purpose? What was the point of bombing the El Wafa hospital, for goodness sake? There are grave uncertainties about whether you are acting within the law.
I disagree.
Yes. Oh, yes. You are deliberately targeting neighborhoods in which you know there are women and children. You've tried everything with Gaza. You've besieged it for 7 years. The people live an intolerable and ghastly life, and you know that better than anybody. Why don't you try one other thing? Talking. Why not talk? Why not be brave and talk directly with them? Why not?
I can never see this in America. I never seen anything like this in the United States.
It's not difficult to imagine Americans identifying with Palestinians who are suffering. But when your sense of the coverage is that there's something that these people did to deserve this, or that they are affiliated with terrorists and terrorist-minded governments, the fallout of that is an inability to identify with people who are suffering in far greater numbers and in far greater proportion than their Israeli counterparts.
Israel can saturate the media with its spokespeople, but there's still the problem of massive Palestinian casualties showing up on television screens. You can't make those images go away. An Israeli official actually said, "In the war of pictures we lose, so you need to correct, explain, or balance it in other ways." Here again, the Luntz document spells out which talking points have been most effective in spinning the brutal reality of Palestinian casualties. He says the first thing the pro-Israeli spokespeople should do is to express empathy for the innocent victims.
Unfortunately, innocents do get hurt, and we really grieve that.
We're sad for every civilian casualty.
The entire situation is tragic.
Once you've done that, Luntz says, you also have to get people to empathize with Israelis by describing what life is like for them, living in constant fear of Hamas rocket attacks. So again and again, we hear the focused, tested phrase that the rockets are raining down on Israel.
We have thousands of rockets raining down on our civilians.
Rockets were raining down on Israel.
Any advertising executive will tell you the essence of propaganda is repetition.
Rockets raining down on southern Israel.
Rockets raining down on Israel.
Well, Hamas rockets rained down on Israeli border towns.
Then Luntz tells PR spokespeople to turn the tables and ask the American people, what would you do?
So what would you do in the United States?
Can you imagine what America would do if it were facing a similar threat?
We always try to ask you the question we ask ourselves. What will you do? What would you do?
What sort of question is this? Of course, anybody would act to defend themselves against unprovoked aggression, but it is a question that is completely devoid of any context. What drives a society to a point where after multiple devastating wars, they continue to resist with these most feeble methods? They don't want you to ask that question. They don't want you to ask what is behind this. What's the history here? Who are these people? Where did they come from? Why are they so desperate? No, they want you to understand Israeli behavior. Israeli behavior is always characterized as a reaction to unprovoked violence.
The effort to shape American perceptions of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has been taken up by a number of pro-Israel groups based in the US. Together, these groups are commonly referred to as the Israel lobby. Nowhere has the lobby's power to shape a pro-Israel narrative been more visible than in the US Congress, due largely to the efforts of one of the most influential lobbying groups working on Capitol Hill today, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, better known as AIPAC.
It is great to see so many good friends from all across the country.
I see more than 10,000 people, young and old.
AIPAC's annual conference draws nearly 10,000 attendees from around the country, including the most influential members of both houses of Congress from both parties.
Remember, there are 7 congressional office buildings.
As you leave here today to meet with your senators and representatives, I want you to go there knowing with certainty that you'll make a difference with every member that you meet.
You're going to feel so good when 6 months from now you see the 3 major talking points evolve to 3 points of legislation for the U.S. government.
The bill is passed.
It would be very hard for ordinary Americans to know that they're being deceived, that some very competent experts at spin management are, in fact, deluding them. There are many reasons for this. One of them is that the American political class has basically swallowed the line, hook, line, and sinker.
They keep getting rocket attack after rocket attack, and then they're criticized for human rights problems because they defend themselves.
This is particularly true for Republicans.
They're responding, Mr. Speaker, to attacks on their civilian population. I mean, what is it that they want? Well, we know what they want. They want Israel obliterated from the map, Mr. Speaker.
But it's also true for many Democrats.
We stand with our ally. We stand with the democratic state of Israel. We stand against terrorism.
This administration will always stand up for Israel's right to defend itself.
They made the mistake of actually leaving AIPAC's fax address on one bill that was actually laid before Congress. And of course, nobody was apparently embarrassed.